Hello and welcome to the big fight. 25 years ago was one of the darkest days that India has ever seen. In the morning, 25 years ago, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, was killed. And by this time, 25 years ago, we were already starting to see unfolding in the national capital an incident that would probably be one of the biggest blots that we've ever seen in this nation, where gangs of people were walking around killing fellow Indians just because they belonged to a particular religion. Why are we going into history 25 years later? Essentially, today, it is to ask ourselves a question. Can it still happen again? Can it ever happen again? And if it can, what can we do to stop it? But before I introduce the panelists and start going into some of those questions, let's just pause for a minute to remember what actually happened in those riots 25 years ago. So we're looking back at history to ask ourselves this question, could it ever happen again? And it has happened, of course, after 1984. It happened in Mumbai, it happened in Gujarat, and every time we as a nation ask ourselves that question, how can we stop it from ever happening again? Let's see if we can try and find some of perhaps the answers today. Let me just welcome our panelists who are with us today. Harinder Baveja, Editor, Investigation, Tehelka, old friend of all of us. Great to have you with us right here. Chandan Mitra, Senior Leader of the BJP, but also one of the top journalists in this country for a long, long time. So it's great to have you with us. Manish Tiwari, for whom the events of that particular era, you're of course spokesperson of the Congress Party, but for whom the events of that particular decade, of course, also have a personal element of tragedy, Manish, for you, and we do know that, we do recognize that. Zafar Sareshwala, an industrialist who was one of the victims of the Gujarat riots and therefore knows what it is to go through incidents of trauma like that. Nalini Singh, whom of course we've known for all that period. You used to be broadcasting at that time, and very little would happen in TV. And one of the questions, Nalini, that we would like to ask you today is that had you had 24-hour news channels in that era, would it have made a difference or would it not have made a difference? And then we are also being joined on this program by a number of people for whom the tragedy of 1984 was, of course, deeply, deeply personal. And I'm going to welcome onto the panel Nirpreet Kaur, who was one of the victims of those riots in 1984. And here in the audience, we have lots of very special guests joining us. We have Babu Singh, for example, who's the president of the 1984 Victims Justice and Welfare Society. We have Karnail Singh, Peer Mohammed, who's also a victim of the riots. So we'll be hearing your voices also as we go on. Harinder, I want to kick off with you, actually. Can it happen again?
Well, as you said, we've seen what happened in Gujarat, Vikram. So obviously, if the state is responsible in manufacturing a riot, then yes, it's going to happen again and again and again. And I think what's important is that this culture of impunity that so surrounds our politicians and the policemen, until that stops, it's going to continue to happen. And 2002 testifies to this fact, because 84 was heinous enough. If the state was serious in not repeating massacre of communities, Gujarat would not have repeated itself.
Chandan, it's the state which, Shami is almost saying, Harinder is almost saying that it was the state which colluded, if not encouraged, both the 1984 and 2002.
Well, you see, unfortunately, the justice system to which Harinder also alluded, I think leaves a lot to be desired. It is perhaps this culture of impunity that people get away. And therefore, these things can neither be proved nor disproved. There is a public perception, yes, I admit, there is a public perception. But to directly allege that the state was complicit is maybe a perception, but it's a very, very difficult thing to prove in real life. The fact that people who are known and have been seen by thousands to have participated in the riots, to have encouraged the killing of the other communities, that they haven't been really brought to justice. Look at the 84 cases. Even now they are going on. How many have been punished? Gujarat is relatively recent. So I think that there is
not
a very,
many
very
people have been punished for Gujarat either.
Not many have been punished for Gujarat either. But 84, the perpetrators of 84 got away scot-free, which is what I think encourages a large number of politicians to gain kind of cheap publicity and, kind of fan the fires of communal hatred whenever some kind of provocation so-called arises.
Manish Tiwari?
Let me broaden the canvas slightly. Whether it's 84, whether it's 92, whether it's 2002, I don't think any civilized society can condone that kind of mindless violence. And anybody who attempts to, I think, is absolutely being very foolish and needs to be isolated. The fundamental question is there a fault line which runs through communities in India, which if pressed by cynical forces, and if you want to sort of extend the argument by cynical politicians, can really implode? Is the civilizational strength of India not strong enough to surmount these so-called fault lines? I think these are the fundamental issues which need to be addressed. And of course, there is a question of justice. And as a lawyer, let me tell you that the justice delivery system is at the heart of any democratic society. And if people do not get justice, then they find alternative means.
I want to return to the question of why on earth would people do it? What are these fault lines that can make people behave in a manner like that? And is it entirely a cynical political ploy that leads to killings, whether it is Gujarat in 1984? But Zafar, the crucial lessons to your point of view, how do we make sure it doesn't happen again?
See, the most important thing in my view is that why it has been happening. For the past 60 years, we have thousands of riots taking place. Thousands of, even hundreds of thousands of people have been killed. But the single most thing which is not there, or now we are seeing that to happen, is that never ever the perpetrators of the crime have been brought to justice. So that is one very important reason. And there can never be peace without justice. And second, the mindset of the people has to be changed. Unfortunately, we in India, Hindus and the Muslims, and of course the Sikhs and so many communities have been living for thousands of years. But still, there is no interaction the way it has to happen between the communities in our country. I mean, we have been taught, for example...
Is that completely true, or is that interaction starting to improve?
It has started to improve. Now, yes, it cannot repeat again, because post-2002, and of course this 24/7 media has been since about 10 years, but for the first time after 2002 riot, most of these instances were reported live and people saw.
Okay.
One. And second most important thing, where media has taken a cue, that they also brought victims on the fore. And lot of victims, various victims were brought. Their conditions, their apathy, the squalid conditions in which they live was brought to people, and that mindset of lot of people has changed.
I don't want to take Nalini, would you agree with that? What Zafar is saying is that things have changed now. You cannot have it happening again, because post-2002, this 24-hour media, the minute you start having killings, you will immediately get a lot of focus on it. And also the plight of the victims and the fact that that has been reported